Her father's unexpected passing prompts an upright lawyer to find the person responsible for his demise, but instead she makes a horrifying discovery that's beyond her wildest imagination. In a strange eerie room, a man wakes up shirtless, lying on an elevated flat surface. Confused and scared, he tries to move his body, but as he does, something grabs his arm. He freezes in terror as an otherworldly tentacle wraps around his elbow, tightly squeezing his arm until it severed and falls to the ground. Meanwhile, crime is on the rise in the small town of Ashland, Derby. A determined public defender handles a brutal case involving a housewife and her husband. The opposing lawyer argues that the photographic evidence lacks context and cannot be linked to the woman's injuries. The judge agrees that the proof isn't enough to make a conclusion. Frustrated, Derby fires back and sarcastically accuses the man of beating his wife. The judge intervenes and calls Sheriff Williams as the next witness. Their counselor urges him to read his report on the defendant's statement, but the opposition objects and presents footage showing that he failed to read the Miranda rights. Eventually the case gets dismissed since Williams' statement can't be included. Derby demands reconsideration, but the judge reminds her that the courtroom follows strict principles like the rest of the world. The public defender persists, determined to fight for justice despite her disappointment. However, she's advised to find solid evidence, starting with the cop. After the trial, Derby and Williams share an intimate moment in his office as she hopes to persuade the man to take his job more seriously next time. Later that evening, as she arrives home, she hears muffled moaning from inside the house. She walks in to find her father on doing nasty stuff with a random chick named Gina. Disgusted, she orders the woman to leave and confronts her father. Since he lives in her house, she expects him to follow her rules and admits she regrets letting him move in. Ron furiously calls out her self-righteousness and reveals the real reason he's staying. He has a fatal disease and can't be alone. However, Derby refuses to see it as an excuse for his behavior. In a final blow, the man accuses his daughter of hypocrisy, saying she has her own dirty secrets with the married sheriff. Humiliated, she storms off with the weight of his words sinking in. Alone, the counselor lights a cigarette, trying to push away the guilt, but deep down she hates that she's once again being labeled the villain. Later that evening, the stunning Neela steps into the bar she owns. She pours her best friend a free drink and casually reminds her about their upcoming girls' night out. When Derby barely reacts to her proposition, the business owner senses that the trial didn't go her way, which she confirms, sighing. The counselor also confesses something heavier. Her father is dying of a serious illness and she has to take care of him at home. Neela is caught off guard and asks why she agreed to the arrangement. The woman hesitates but finally admits she longs for a real family, leaving her best friend speechless. Before leaving, Derby asks if Neela knows Gina, describing her as a blonde and overly skanky woman. The bar owner laughs as most of her customers fit the description. Meanwhile, in the dead of night, Ron wanders the empty streets searching for his fling. As he moves deeper into the quiet alleys, he hears an intimate sound coming from a nearby building, so he curiously opens the door. Suddenly there's a burst of purple light and a monstrous alien-like arm lunges forward from the shadows and pulls him in. The next morning, Derby wakes up to her dad cooking breakfast, which surprises her as he's never done it before. His whole demeanor seems different, so she skeptically asks what's gotten into him. Ron admits that he realizes he's never treated her the way a father should. The man thanks his daughter for always being there for him and promises to be the dad she deserves. Surprised by his unexpected change, she hesitantly thanks him and leaves for work at the courthouse. Derby comes across a shocking article about Williams. In it, the cop publicly thanks Peter, the person who got her case dismissed, for bolstering his campaign. Feeling betrayed, she heads straight to her paramour's office and asks if the man's financial support influenced his handling of the case. While he denies it, their argument quickly escalates, prompting the woman to leave the room. In the evening, Ron stares at his reflection in the mirror. As he's shaving his beard, he accidentally cuts himself, but instead of blood, a thick black liquid oozes from the wound. He panics and tries to stop the bleeding, but the gash widens and the dark fluid seeps into his shirt. His hands tremble as he covers it, but the more he presses down, the more it spreads. Meanwhile, Derby calls out for her father, but he doesn't respond. When she finds him barely conscious on the floor, she freezes in shock, then rushes to his side and cries hysterically. When the police finally arrive, Sheriff Williams and Darius, the medical examiner, investigate the scene and suspect that he reacted to some kind of medication. The men question his daughter, who mentions that Ron went out to drink after their argument the previous night. The coroner asks if she noticed anything strange about her father, so she admits that he was acting unusually that morning. Seeing Darby's distress, the cop reassures her that they'll get to the bottom of it, but she coldly stares at him and reminds him to do his job right. This time in the medical room, Darius examines Ron's body and is shocked to discover a strange black organ inside him. Meanwhile, Neela visits her best friend and finds her sleeping peacefully. Wanting to comfort her, she wakes Darby to bond over a few drinks. The lawyer opens up about the storm of emotions she's feeling: sick, disgusted, scared and relieved all at once. She hates how Ron died and recalls his last words, saying how sorry he was and that he wanted to be a better father. She then wonders if she ever really knew the man back in his laboratory. Darius invites the sheriff to share his findings as he taps the bizarre organ. The dogs outside start to bark. Williams doesn't understand what he's trying to prove, so the coroner plays a recording from earlier which explains that the sound captured is beyond what the human ear can detect. Darius believes the organ isn't a mutation but is designed for communication. Meanwhile, the women reminisce on their youth and tease each other about their childhood sweethearts. Darby playfully jabs at her friend, saying she was always so attractive that boys fell for her effortlessly, but as their conversation deepens, Neela admits that her first love was Ron. The public defender is taken aback by the confession and asks how it started. The bar owner, Tia, explains it happened on the night that her friend moved out with her mom. When Nilo went to their old home to retrieve her iPod, Ron made his advances on her, aware of what her father is capable of. Darby asks her friend why she allowed the man to groom her. Still crying, she believes she was too naive to understand what was happening at the time. The lawyer weeps for her best friend and wonders why she never told her. Her best friend admits she was consumed by guilt and blamed herself for the indiscretion. Neela repeatedly apologizes as she sobs, but Darby embraces the woman and assures her that she loves her nonetheless. That evening, Darius immerses himself in investigating the bizarre organ. As he studies its structure, he discovers striking similarities to the ultrasonic frequencies of a praying mantis. His research suggests that it isn't just for hearing but a tool for manipulation, capable of controlling nearby objects to lure unsuspecting prey. Determined to cover more, the coroner prepares to surgically examine the organ at her house. Darby finds Neela still fast asleep on the couch, so she plays a calming white noise in the background to ease her mind. Within seconds, the sound causes her friend to awaken in a state of panic, forcing her to hurriedly leave without any explanation. The following day, the counselor tracks down Gina and visits her apartment. She demands to know how she knew her dad, so the woman explains they met at the pet store where she works. Unmoved by her romantic story, she bluntly tells her that Ron passed away and proceeds to describe his gruesome death. This shocks his lover, who insists she has nothing to do with it. Darby clarifies that she isn't blaming her and wonders if she has any information that might help her understand his untimely demise, but Gina doesn't know anything. As she's leaving, she gets an urgent message from the medical examiner, so she heads to the morgue. The Darius briefs Sheriff Williams and the lawyer on his recent discovery. He believes that the blood pooling from Ron's neck follows a structured pattern. This confuses the woman, so the coroner explains that certain sounds produce frequencies that can move physical objects, implying something unnatural with her father's condition. Later that evening, Darby visits the bar owner to check in on her. When Neela asks how she is, she admits she's still grieving over her father and feels bad for what he did to her. However, her friend dismisses it and says that she's moved on, but the counselor sees through her lies. As the conversation unfolds, an old worker at the bar stares at the women. Neela orders him to get back to work, but he simply stands there and doesn't move. Only after she calls him a third time does he walk away, and he casts an eerie glance at Darby. The lawyer notices Neela's dirt issues, but she shrugs it off, saying the basement has messy floors and it's part of the job. She quickly changes the subject and asks about Ron, prompting his daughter to hesitantly share the disturbing findings. At the morgue that night, Darby receives an unexpected call from Gina, who says that her father called her several times after she left their apartment. She then forwards his voice messages, and as she listens to them, she notices the grime underneath her dad's footwear. She lifts them up to investigate and decides to take them to the morgue for evaluation. Meanwhile, Williams shows up at the bar to ask if Ron was there the night he passed away. Neela firmly says he wasn't, but the sheriff isn't convinced. convinced and asks to check the basement. She refuses access and explains that it's a cluttered mess and there's nothing interesting to see. However, Williams doesn't back down and insists on taking a look, forcing the woman to act defensively and accuse him of using his authority to bully her. The cop takes a step back and drops a bombshell. He hears Ron's voicemail from that fateful evening. He plays the recording with distinct sounds in their background. The sheriff believes that the noises come from the game machine in Neela's bar, which causes her to stiffen. Just then her two workers step forward and before Williams can react they pin him to the ground. He grits his teeth and looks up at the bar owner, wondering what she'll do with him. The woman doesn't answer and slams her foot into his face, knocking him unconscious. When he regains consciousness, he finds himself in a dim room with a circular light overhead. Then Neela appears from the shadows and removes her top, telling him it'll soon be over. She straddles him and places her hands gently on the sides of his head. The moment her skin touches his, a sharp pain shoots through his skull and he clenches his jaws. His body stiffens as an unbearable pressure builds to the point of rupturing his eardrums. Suddenly William's face becomes expressionless and blood trickles down his temples. Meanwhile, Neela's body changes and begins to twist unnaturally with eyes as black as night. Strange tendrils emerge from her and penetrate the sheriff. The woman lets out a terrifying scream that echoes throughout the room. Moments later she trembles in agony as she gives birth to a being that looks eerily similar to the organ found in Ron's body. As she whimpers in relief, the creature grows rapidly and morphs into a perfect replica of Williams. In the meantime, Darby arrives at the medical office carrying a plastic bag with her father's boots. She scans the space in search of Darius, hoping he can examine them, when she sees the man lifeless and staring blankly at the ceiling. A strangled scream escapes her lips. The same black liquid that oozed from his father's wounds seeps from the coroner's nose and ears, forming an unusual pattern on the floor near his head. Meanwhile, in the dark depths of the bar's basement, the real Ron hangs from heavy chains with his wrists secured high above his head. Neela approaches the weak man and gently grazes his skin with her fingers. She sheds a tear and whispers the same words he said when he took advantage of her youth, that he shouldn't tell anyone about their secret. Weird tendrils then emerge from the woman and slither menacingly in front of his face, threatening him. Desperate to find out what's going on, Darby goes to her friend's bar. She tries the front door but it's locked, so she heads straight for the back entrance, guided only by the dim glow of her phone's flashlight. She cautiously moves through a pitch-black tunnel until she finds her way to the basement. However, her heart stops at the sight of Neela tormenting her father, who turns out to be still alive. The alien appendage sticking out of her friend equally shocks her as her eyes widen and her breath hitches with the unexpected discovery. The bar owner stares back at her in disbelief. Terrified, the woman stumbles backward and bolts out of the room. Relief almost washes over her when she bumps into Williams until he restrains her and brings her to his master. She struggles and screams for help, but Neela yells back at her, causing the black substance around them to shift. Darby demands to know who she is and reminds her of their pact not to keep secrets from each other, and so her friend lives up to her promise and reveals that Ron hurt her when she was young. She adds that he deserves everything he's getting, but the lawyer argues that justice belongs in a courtroom and not in a basement. Neela recalls the night that Darby's dad forced himself on her since she had nowhere to go and no one to turn to. She planned on taking her own life. That's when she heard a strange howling from an abandoned building and discovered something that forever changed her life. In the present, she introduces the grotesque entity that emerges from the wall as Mother. The woman explains she's everything and everywhere, but she'll have to learn to listen to her voice. Neela reverently praises the being as something that's been with them since the beginning, speaking to them and guiding them throughout their lives if only they paid attention. The bar owner says that Mother found her at her lowest point and turned her into something great by giving her the ability to take evil people and turn them into good. She found her purpose in life one by one. Neela cites the vile men in the room as examples of how she's changing the world for the better. She tells Darby that the entity wants the same for her, though she has to let her in as her friend urges her to touch it. The public defender slowly reaches out to Mother, unable to resist her silent call. Her fingers tremble as they inch closer, but when the woman reminds her of what did to Ron so she'll have the father she deserves, she snaps out of the trance. Darby stops in her tracks and turns around pretending to be one of them. Neela excitedly welcomes her new sister as she slowly approaches the sheriff's replica. The lawyer gently caresses the cop and secretly switches his radio on, then suddenly punches him in the face and kicks him as his walkie-talkie plays white noise. The infected people nearby suffer, including Mother, who throbs uncontrollably against the wall. Seeing this as her chance to escape, Darby takes off with only her flashlight guiding her way through the basement. She comes across several bloody people in chains and spots Williams as she rushes to free the sheriff. She hears terrifying screams echoing in the background. Unable to get him loose in time, panic takes over, so she decides to keep on moving while Darby tries to find an exit. Neela catches up to her and says she owes her for leaving her alone to deal with the trauma that Ron caused years ago. Having heard enough, the public defender reaches for the bottles beside her and throws them towards her friend, shattering them and spilling their contents on the floor. She then ignites her lighter despite Neela's protests and throws it in her direction. As the woman catches fire and screams in agony, Darby looks away and runs upstairs for safety. While she eventually finds her way out, she doesn't make it far as she writhes from the intense pain in her belly, similar to what her friend felt when she first met Mother. Unexpectedly, Peter arrives on the scene and finds her on her knees as the unjust man jokes about buying her a drink. The scorned lawyer tightly holds onto her abdomen with a vindictive look on her face.